This month, we're going to go through, which is the month of Tibet. Depending on the year, sometimes it starts, a week or two earlier. We're probably about 5 days into it. Are you guys familiar with the months and the seasons? I think most of these spaces are. All right, let's see. So I would say a couple of things just up front that I have a lot of content for you. So there's a lot of information here. Some slides I'm just going to move through kind of fast. But for the most part, feel free to ask a question at the end. We always have Q&A. This slide is for those of you that have never been here before. So Val, I think you and maybe Robin are the ones who haven't come in the past year. So this is just kind of setting the stage for why it's important to understand God's seasons and timing. It's because it provides a strategy, revelation. We get to synergize with God so we can do things in the season that He's doing it, or in the month, so get a bigger bang for our buck, if you will. And then affirmation. I found often after I started to learn about the months and the seasons and the cycles, that the things that were going on in my life as I look back was exactly in sync with what God was saying about that month. So it really provided a lot of affirmation, and it was really helpful in navigating the things that are going on each year. All right, so one of the things I covered too, this is just kind of one of our basic slides at the beginning, is that God has made so many provisions for how we can understand the months, the seasons, and the cycles, and His timing. And these are just kind of the short list of those items. So it's everything from the tribes to the actual seasons, like what happens in the winter, what happens in the summer. The gates of Jerusalem are another prophetic piece that allows us to have a little more insight into God's ways. We've got Bible scriptures, historical events, constellations, the body, so understanding the energetic fields and the function. Hebrew letters, of course, the living letters have a big part in providing the glimpses and the prophetic understanding of how God works. And gemstones. I know that always gets a little tricky in some church settings, but reminding ourselves that the ephod was garnished with the gemstones, and it was actually in that place of being with God in that inner court where the ephod actually had magical powers. So those are just some ways that we can lean into His prophetic provisions. And then to complement that, we get to respond. So that's really the two-step there, is that God provides the prophetic information and all of the information, and then we partner with Him in our responses. And this is just a short list of different ways that we can respond. So what you'll see is that these things, this list here, like meditation, declarations, prayer, journaling, this is the type of work or activity that you'll see in the workbook that comes out each month. It'll be emailed to you. So it's a way for you to plug in week by week and really just, I would say it's kind of like the Cliff Notes. So you've already learned about the month, and now you're going to have activities that you can pick and choose from and just apply to your life throughout the month to really go deeper with what God's saying. All right, and lastly, God's intention, like his cycle of doing things, is always to break out, break free, cross over, and possess. And we need to remind ourselves of that. Because sometimes we just do one or two. But His full cycle, His complete cycle, is that in the end He possess. And when you think about in the Bible, Old Testament, at the end of everything that they went through, they're always crossing over. I mean, how many times did they go over Jordan, right? Like they're always crossing over, and it's always to possess. So they're always taking territory. They're always gaining more authority. There's always that on the back end. This is just a list, a short list actually. There's probably 5 other resources. These are the different places that we get all of our information from. So we're really an aggregate of a lot of data and information that's out there, available to all of you as well. And this is an example of what the workbook looks like. So this was the one that we did for Heshvan, and it's the 2-sided there. So it'll be probably like 20 pages long, and we'll email that out if you're on the list registered. All right, so here we go. These are the typical categories that we go through. We talk about historical events, scriptures, common themes, the obstacles and pitfalls. So I always have a slide at the end that talks about like, so what are the things in this month that are kind of gonna maybe bite you, right? So here's your at a glance. This is the first month, Tibet, in the winter season. So we're moving into a new season. It's the first month, hi there, and it's the 10th month in the Hebrew calendar. And 10 is a very significant number. You can see I've got some definitions here. It's considered the perfection of the divine order. It's considered a holy number. It's also identified as sinking or immersing. So the beginning to or of the end. So we'll kind of dive into that a little bit so it becomes a little more clear. The last point there is that it's really a time to give back, is what a lot of the Jewish tradition is. And so even though I don't know if we've really taken that on as kind of the Christian perspective, but you can see it in the holidays that happen this month, right? Hanukkah is one of the holidays that crosses over this month, and also Christmas. And there's a lot of gift giving. So we get a lot of our roots based on some of these things that we know about the months and the seasons. So over to the right is a snapshot of different things and focuses that God has for the month. So for this month, the area of healing is around anger, victimization, and judgment. So those are the areas that he wants to heal. The action that's needed is we need to come up to a higher perspective. So we want to gain. There's going to be a lot around seeing and sight in this month, and we really want to bring ourselves up to a higher perspective. And a lot of that is going to be how we view our authority. The warfare would be around any demonic influences that are allowed. So really learning how to bind and loosen. What does that mean? If you're unfamiliar with it, maybe that's a takeaway from today, is to really understand what is that biblically and how do you do it. The Hanukkah is the holiday of this month. So most months have a holiday, a feast, or a festival. This one, Hanukkah, again, is one of the only, I think it's the only celebration that spans 2 months. So we get the last half of Hanukkah here in this month of Tibet. And then we've got probably the only thing of note right now is the constellation is the Capricorn. And it's interesting because the Capricorn, most people when they hear that are thinking probably astrology, but in this context, the Jewish context, it's really astronomy. And it goes back to Genesis, right, where the stars were the signs and the wonders. And so this particular constellation, a sea goat, is really kind of fascinating, right? Those two things don't seem to go together. So it's a goat that has a fishy tail, and the two represent very different things. The fish, as we get to, will be the redemption. Often fish was a picture of redemption, and I don't know if you've ever seen, but in the Last Supper, a lot of the paintings in the Catholic paintings, like when you go to the places over in Rome, you'll see that what they're eating is fish, because fish has a lot to do with redemption. And then the goat has a lot to do with how we come to the table, and we'll talk about that a little bit.
Hey, real quick before you go, next slide, if you go back. The tribe of Simeon. Today, Pastor Joe talked about Simeon as the one who blessed Jesus at the end. And so it's interesting that it's actually the tribe that's on this month as well.
And I'll say that in my own research, I've found some, controversy is not the right word, but some varying opinions around the tribe. So some would think that this tribe has more to do with Dan, and then some Simeon. So there are still sometimes where I'm doing my research and I'm like, gosh, I can see both perspectives. So I don't always focus on the tribe unless I see that all sources are lining up to the one. So I won't go into the tribe today, but that's super fun to see. And by the way, back to that affirmation, you guys, so many times, like now as you're coming through the months, if you come back, you'll start to recognize how Joe's message is pretty much always in alignment. And he's not coming here. I'm not doing like a debrief with him, before the month starts or anything. And it's super fun to see that the Holy Spirit is moving in that way into this awesome alignment. So, to remind ourselves, we all get to hear from him. So this is at the highest level that, at a high level, like the month's focus, if I were to sum it up, is it's responding to the light. So this month has so much to do with our response to things, whether it's the circumstances in our life, the light versus the dark in front of us, we get to choose. So our response is our agency, because our agency is choice. That is what makes everything so interesting, right? Is that just from the very beginning of time, we had the choice to choose to eat from the tree. We had the choice to love God and be with Him. So it is a month of contradictions as well. All right. So I always think that's a little bit interesting that the word to that tav is the first letter. Or word, part of the word, and it means good, and at the same time, this is a Babylonian name, and it also means sinking and immersing. So really the idea of sinking in the mud. And I don't know how many of you, do you think that sinking in the mud is good? Right? And that's kind of like what you're going to see all throughout the month. It is this controversy kind of between the two, a contradiction. And it's for us to kind of figure out which way are we going to go. That's a lot of what this month is about, which way you're going to go. So receiving requires a response. Again, the idea of responding to the light or responding to the dark. A lot around light and darkness. So we're going to, what is considered the darkest month is this month. And that's one of the ways that we clearly understand Hanukkah, right? Is because they didn't think there was going to be oil. God provided the miracle. He provided the light, but it was going to be the darkest month, okay? And even throughout the Bible, there's the idea of the wicked lamp or the light of the wicked. And so recognizing that sometimes darkness is identified as actually a lighter room or a room is dark, but it's also from like a Jewish perspective, a Hebrew perspective, it's also the energy within. So all energy, if you see it under a microscope, and what they do with energy, you can see the sparks of light, but there's just different levels of it. So reminding yourselves that this is considered the darkest month, so we actually have to go after the light, okay? Embody it. And then lastly, this month at a high level here, the focus is assignment, appointment, mandate, or numbering. So this was the month, the season when these things happened, when David counted his fighting men, when Hezekiah appointed people into positions, and when the temple was appointed, there were appointed areas for the temple for sacrifices. So recognizing when we go in, and I'll talk a little bit about, actually a lot about the number 10, which is this month, because at the end of this month, you're setting yourself up, which is interesting enough, because in our calendar today, the new year, right, in January, it's always your New Year's goals, your whole plan of what you're going to do. And so it really aligns with new assignments. So let's get into that. So Hanukkah, just at a high level here, I talked about it a little bit last month, so these are a few new points around Hanukkah because it comes back over into this month. There's 3 days of the holiday found into that of Hanukkah. There are 3 scrolls read from the Ark on the Shabbat of Hanukkah, which I thought was pretty interesting. The Festival of Lights is one way it's referred to, and also the Feast of Dedication. So there are 2 parts to Hanukkah. And the lights, it's really, I would guess we would say that it's understanding that we're becoming a lampstand and really understanding that the light is available to us within us. And then the dedication is really focusing on remembering the Lord's miraculous provision, and then from an internal perspective, rededicating ourselves as the temple. And then as a reminder, we talked about it last month, but the Messiah was conceived this month. Funny, right? In the darkest month, he was conceived, but so God. And that's just a reminder that the light will not go out, even in the darkest months.
Good stuff.
Yeah, right? So good. So the number 10, I have like 4 slides, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I was fascinated with how important the number 10 is and how many times we can find it in the Bible. So 10 commences a whole new series of numbers. Think about that, you're now going to 2 digits, right? So reminding yourself that at the end of this month, you're going to a whole new series, a whole new assignment, a whole new way. It's really important to finish strong. It's a completeness of order, making the entire round of anything is significant. 10 implies that nothing is wanting. So again, 10 is considered complete. There's nothing lacking, nothing wanting. So it's the perfect order. It's the 10th generation that was completed, so Noah to God. So I thought, wow, that's really cool, because that's when the flood came, right, with Noah, and that's when everything kind of started over again in a certain way. The 10 commandments contain all that's necessary, so their number and their order is completed in 10 clauses. And also the Lord's Prayer is completed in 10 clauses. 10% was the tithe that was represented and was due from man to God. In the Bible, the 10 gerahs was the redemption money. So again, that key to this month is redemption. There's redemption available to us always, right? And so those pieces of money had to do with silver. Silver is also tied to redemption. And notice this area here that I have underlined. Do you guys remember the story when David numbered his people, but then judgment followed?
Here's what I found.
I think Siri found it too. The reason why there was judgment that followed is because he didn't make an offering after doing the counting. And that was always part of the deal, is that we would count and then there would be an offering, the half shekel. 10 plagues completed the circle of God's judgment. The Antichrist world power shows up in tens. So it's comprised of the 10 kingdoms. It's the 10 toes on Nebuchadnezzar's dream on the statue, and it's the 10 horns on the fourth beast in Daniel's vision. Abraham's covenant possessions are the whole of 10 nations. So that's the 10 nations. His faith was tested with 10 trials. There are 10 rebellions of Israel in the wilderness, and it marks the series of Israel's perversity, so a complete set of everything that they did. And then it's 10 silver sockets forming the foundation of the tabernacle, and 10 curtains to complete it. 10 times fire came down from heaven, 6 of them were judgments. And this is something that we see a lot in this month, is that, again, it's the light and the dark, so there can be mercy and there can be judgment. It's not both, but we have the option to receive either one. 10 times the people shouted for joy, it talks about. The 10 virgins representing the whole of Israel. We talked about that story last month as the beginning of Hanukkah, and really making sure that we have oil in our lamps, right? God's righteous curses, are completed in a series of 10. 10 persons uttered the confession and acknowledged their desert of divine judgment. So this is found in the Bible where the confessions happened, and 6 were individual, most of the times by the priests. So, one-on-one, David confesses his acknowledgement and the judgment, and then 4 of them were on the behalf of the we. 10 words of Psalms 119 complete the cycle of divine description of his word. So within that psalm, we see that these are the 10 words. So it has to do with way, testimony, precepts, commandments, law, judgment, righteousness, statutes, word. And those also correspond to the 10 commandments. There's 10 parables of the kingdom in Matthew. And lastly, there are 10 particulars as the unrighteous who shall not enter the kingdom. So in 1 Corinthians, it talks about the 10 things that are the particulars that will not allow you to enter into the kingdom. 10-fold enumeration to assure the saints, all who are in Christ. So that's where we can find, 10 clauses, 10 enumerations for those of us that are saints in Romans. There's 10 I ams in John. There are 10 instances in the Old Testament of younger sons being preferred out of order, right, with Jacob and Esau as an example. 10 deaths were occasioned by women. 10 Passovers are recorded. And in the Talmud, there are 10 different words used for idols. And a few other things. But that's a lot, 10, huh? Yeah, it's really significant. So we should really take note. All right, our first theme is light and dedication. So I don't remember which month it was. I want to say maybe Heshvan. It's really something that God cares about, which is our temple. How many of you guys know that? He actually literally cares about the body. I think sometimes with New Testament work, we kind of forget, we focus a lot on the spirit, which is great. And at that same time, sometimes we can forget that God has such a desire to see our bodies whole, right? Our bodies healthy. And at the end of the day, when our bodies aren't healthy, we're kind of no good, right? Like he actually needs a temple. He needs a physical body, a dirt body is what I say, to inhabit, to really do anything, right? So this is really coming to highlight for this month that we as the temple, we're rededicating our body, the physical aspect, which again is kind of funny because a lot of people, I think, with the New Year's resolutions has to do with taking care of their physical body, right? New exercise programs, that last about a month. But this is really one of the opportunities, and it's in sync with what he wants to do. So we rededicate ourselves in the respectful treatment of our body. This also has to do with looking for proof that the temple is cleansed and dedicated. So last month we talked about cleansing and dedication, and it carries over to this month, but at a different level, where you're really looking for proof, right? So many times we're going through our lives, going through the months, and there's really, it's kind of like corporate America, right? You can't just start a project without closing it out and saying, here was the ROI, the return on investment. And I would love to see us grow in a place of maturity where we're literally looking at the ROI after we've gone through a fast, after we've gone through learning a new skill. Really, what's different now? Show me the proof. Where's the fruit in the thing that we either said we did or we're going to do and received? So this Matthew verse here, I love. It says, the eye is the light of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be filled with light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body will be filled with darkness. So really searching our own lives this month, as we've been doing it for the last few months, but going deeper again to really understand the idea of where is there any evil? Where is there any sin? Because it has a lot to do with the eye this month. And our eye is considered, from what I can tell, the heart is really considered our thoughts, but the eye is the understanding. So it has more to do with wisdom. And so I think it's not on the slide, it's on the next slide. We'll get to it where I'm talking about enlightening the eyes of our heart. So it's that idea that we want to get our eyes to come up to a higher perspective, and we want to make sure we're removing the darkness from our eyes. God gives us the ability to channel chaos and refine it into light. Think about that. You right? I love to laugh and the smile. Yeah, it's something big, actually, not very small. But that in every situation that we walk into, not only do we have the authority, but because we carry light, when we encounter darkness, one, it doesn't know how to interact with us. So we need to get really prepared on what is it that we're going to do when we're entering into a place where there's darkness. But then also to understand that what we carry, like this vessel, because it is a temple of God, it actually has the ability to absorb darkness and push it back out as refined light. So we're no longer coming into a situation and being affected by the situation. We actually live at a different level, right? We come in and we change the situation. Have you ever heard the analogy with the thermostat? Well, so the thermostat is where you can come in and you can turn it up or down. So it's really the idea of changing the temperature in the room. So it's very similar to us coming into a room that has darkness, or people that we meet, or you and family members, right? So how do we come into the room and actually change that? So the other piece that I found that was really key was the understanding, both symbolically, with the menorah, that there are a couple components to understanding it that apply to this month. Again, we're still in Hanukkah this month, so it's really appropriate. Well, so the menorah has, it symbolizes the 7 spirits of God, and one of them is wisdom. And wisdom is really highlighted this month as a way to move forward and complete the full cycle and then go into the new year. So in the Bible it says, wisdom is greater than silver. It's just so much talking about wisdom. That first Bible verse, the Proverbs 3:14-35 is all about wisdom. And we were talking about it today in Cecilia's class, how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And so on this traditional menorah, which is, it's only got the 7 branches, the very middle is the fear of the Lord, because all of the spirits of God come from the understanding and having the fear of the Lord. The lampstand, which is the candle the candle in the middle, talks about that in Exodus. And wisdom exceeds folly, as light is better than darkness. So it's just a constant reminder this month that you're going to have to probably choose between folly and wisdom. Find yourself in some situations there. And then the menorah is also symbolically our opportunity to remind ourselves to increase our own light. So the menorah, right, the symbolic thing that we're doing is we're lighting a new candle every night, and we're really called to light our own fire, create our own light here. So it's adding your light to the body of Jesus. We talked about this today, that we want to fulfill the purpose that God has for us, not what other people are doing, that kind of the idea of staying in your own lane. And because when we get ourselves out of order, have you ever found yourself, my husband uses the saying, when we get a little over our skis. Has anyone heard that? No. So when you're skiing, Scott, would you like to describe it?
Oh, sure.
Has it ever happened to you? I'm just kidding.
Often. You're a skier and you're going down the mountain, and all of a sudden you think you're really better than you are, and you start getting a little more aggressive, and then what happens is you kind of get over the top of your skis, and you start doing the tumble thing down the hill, and the result is like your equipment.
A yard sale.
Equipment's all over the place, right? So if you're going a little bit further than what you're capable of, you're kind of getting over your skis. It's the same thing with knowledge. If you're going beyond where you should be, then the journey gets tossed in there as well.
And I'm using it more from the example of sometimes you start dabbling in, a different lane, and that's not where you're called to, and it's not allowing you to show up and fulfill your destiny, which is the thing that you've been called to, just because maybe that new thing looks a little more fun or a little more sexy, whatever that is, right? So it's staying in your lane, it's making sure you don't get over your skis, because what you bring to the table, your part of the light, right, is the most important according to God. Let's see here. And then abiding in His presence is definitely one way that we see that we can really bring in the light and rededicate ourselves. So the body part this month is the liver, right? The liver is all about filtering and purifying the body, which is such a beautiful way to kind of end our year. It's the idea of cleansing yourself from toxic emotions, and it's the ability to overcome temptations and desires. So when we have a filter, then we can overcome things. The anger is stored in the liver. So according to, I don't know if it's the sages or just some of the writings in the Hebrew, there's a lot that's associating anger with the liver. And I think it is because it's the filtering of all the toxins. So this is why it's highlighted this month. It's connected to the feelings of powerlessness, repression, condemnation, disappointment, indecision, or indecisiveness, and panic. So just keep that kind of in your back pocket, that's where the enemy is going to try to bring a little bit of a headache, a little bit of torment, is because that is the thing that he's doing this month. So we also get to get insights into what he's trying to do. The meridian, so this goes back to the way the body was designed, is active between 1 and 3 a.m. So those emotions, you might find yourself waking up around those times and feeling one of those emotions. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you ask the Holy Spirit why they're being triggered and then release them. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, which happened around this time. And according to the Jewish studies, is that it was actually made into a liver. Because the liver represented cold by nature and represents indifference. And that leads us into our second theme, which is sight and higher perspective. So I love this part because I feel like it changes everything. When we actually see clearly, we come up to a higher perspective. It's so empowering. So here we go. We want to see God's hand and perspective in everything. And that's really a training of your thinking and your brain, right? Like it's really easy to just stay at a low vibration, just see things the way you've been doing it. So hopefully you'll see that in your activity book that there'll be activities that you could be doing to bring yourself up to that next level of seeing. So I always love to remind myself when things aren't going the way I want them to, of Jeremiah 29, that his plans for me are good and his plan is to prosper me. So when I'm not seeing that in my life, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? You said this, right? So take action on that. This is also an opportunity to see what we couldn't before. So a lot of what God is doing in this month is kind of these subtle shifts underneath the tide. And really, if we're aware and we're following what he's doing, we should see a lot of fruit out of this month because he really wants to relay to us new strategy, new paths to freedom, and an idea of what needs to be done. So he's super excited about your destiny, as always, and that's really a lot of what this month is setting us up for, is the next year and the things, the plans, purposes, the destiny that he has for us. We want to see things as separate and separated. There's a lot of power in that when we can separate the physical or the unseen and the seen, right? So really coming to each situation or just the way you're living your life is really understanding how the spiritual influences or the unseen and then what's physical. It says here, separate your evil inclination to stay connected to God and see evil and stand against it in prayer with words of life. So the letter we'll get to it here, the letter is I am, and it's the I, and the letter that comes right after it in the alphabet is Pe, which is to speak. So what I've found is that in this month, it's really important to see what's going on and then speak something differently. And so when we kind of bring those two together, we have a very different outcome. Because remember, God spoke the universe into existence. So we as saints carrying his spirit, we have the same power and authority. And you'll see that in the workbook. And we want to allow the eyes of our understanding to be enlightened with truth. So truth is a really big deal this month, and really being able to kind of sift out where the truth is and where the lie is, which is the difference between light and dark. So opening the eyes of our heart, asking the Lord to share with us what the triggers are. Because we've been going through months of inner healing and really understanding the roots of our pain, and this is still an opportunity to understand where those triggers are as we're coming through the completed circle, right? The completed number 10. We don't want to go into the new year not knowing this stuff. So the last part here is that we want to press forward with boldness into our destiny. We want to declare that God can interrupt the order we are walking in. This is what I was talking about earlier, referring to, and make it better, bringing it into his order. So if there's anywhere in our lives where we are not on the path to the path or the destiny or the assignment that he has for us right now, that we would declare and make it available to him to change it, okay? So that's, again, part of responding to what he says is really making sure that he has access to our lives in that way. Ask the Lord to override your natural constraints for his purposes. I'm starting to see that I don't have enough information yet, and I want to study it more, but there's definitely some aspects of time this month where there's a battle for your time. And the reason why is because if the enemy can get you out of your cycle, get you distracted, you might have to wait a whole season, you might have to wait a whole year to get back into cycle and sync. So really taking a look at your time this month and knowing that the enemy is looking to manipulate or change your times, And then God was really seeking to multiply it. So declare the second and make that a priority, that you're looking to see him multiply it. And then lastly, hold off on starting something new. There were a lot of warnings because this month is about kind of reconnecting with God, the dedication, making sure that the cleansing and the dedication has happened, going after rooted lies. So sometimes we get, I don't know, maybe a little sidetracked, like it's not really fun doing those things anymore, you know? So we run into something new, and this was the warning that I saw, was don't go into new contracts, partnerships, deals, because this is really a time to stay focused because you want to complete the month of 10, you want to complete well, and go into this next year. All right, here's the letter. These are the meanings of the letter, and it's the letter Ayin. I didn't put the picture up here, but it's a picture. The picture of it, the picture graph is really looks like an eye. This means an eye to see. So for this month, it's very much about the eye to see. Look and look again. So the things that look a certain way at the surface are going to look differently if you look again. So let your good eye see is how they say. So everything comes into perspective. And be wise to see the future. So I thought that was interesting because it's not like foretelling, it's not looking into the future. It's really understanding that God is continually recreating the world, right? With everything, he's always recreating. If you think about it, like you always have a new circumstance to go into, you're always going to have a new emotion. He's constantly recreating. That's actually universal law. It's also considered a fountain or a well. And it's also, here number 4, it says to see, to understand, and obey. So part of the significance of this letter is that we're looking to understand and seeing. So we're not just looking. So it really is taking it from just looking to seeing, which is that next level, kind of the look and look again. Truly seeing to apply understanding, or true seeing is to apply understanding. So that's part of that response, right, in the very beginning. Interconnectedness of all things and hidden mysteries is considered part of this letter. And that this is a time for insight, discernment, and perception, which is, again, wisdom. So we get the empathy to see through the eyes of another or to see what the Father is saying, which is really beautiful. So we have access to that differently this month than in other times. So here's 4 out of 5 themes. It's the siege and the restriction. So this is still the time when the temple was under siege, when Nebuchadnezzar brought them into exile, when the Maccabees took back the temple from the Greeks. So there's still a lot of siege and restriction going on, and it plays a role in both the spiritual and the physical. So fasting is an example of restriction, right, at some level. And they fasted, and they still do, on the 10th of Tebet, which is December 22nd, as a way to remember and reconnect to God and what he did. It's also, fasting is an opportunity for joy, which I love that idea, that they're actually looking at it as an opportunity to fix something that needed to be fixed. And let's see here, it's a divine attribute of mercy, or there's a divine attribute during fasting of mercy that can be drawn down. It's considered the sweetness of heaven. And for those of us that have fasted before, it's a little hard in the beginning, but there is something so sweet about that time, right? Like where you feel like things are a little different because you're taking certain things off your plate, no pun intended, but also like your focus, right? Like you're refocusing on only a few things because you can't do the eating right now or whatever you're fasting from. Could be social media. So the siege and restriction is also for the body this month. So God's essence derives satisfaction from the body. So going back to how he sees the body. He loves the physical body and everything about it. And it's really for us to take care of it. I'm always a little fascinated sometimes when we don't take care of our body. Well, how does that translate to God, in Thanksgiving? So the soul derives its vitality from the body, And the refinement of the body should always involve satisfaction, which I thought was very interesting, because sometimes we have it, but it's almost like it's something we have to work into. You know, some people that are runners, right? They're runners and they get a runner's high, for example, so that's probably satisfaction. Or when you've just, done a really good walk or played pickleball, right? And you got your heart rate up and you just know it's good for you. It wasn't necessarily for vanity. You're not maybe trying to lose 20 pounds, but you're keeping your body healthy and really treating it like a temple. And then a physical cleanse is another opportunity this month that you'll see and hear about, and it's a way to really siege and take back things that have been lost based on your fasting and whatever else you're doing. So the story of Esther is this month. So on the first of Tebet, Esther was crowned, which I thought was really cool. And just worth noting that in this place of, you guys probably all know the story of Esther, she gets a choice, right? Mordecai comes to her and he's basically sharing with her that she needs to step into this, so she's got to help figure this out. She's in a position of authority or potential authority. And she has an opportunity to partner with the light and obey, or not, right? And the really clear opposite decision to what she made would be that some other generation would then have to be the deliverer if she said no, if she thought it was just going to be too hard or inconvenient. So again, this month is so much about, are we willing to step into the light and obey, or just go with the comfort? And we'll talk about comfort a lot next month, because it's a real thing that God wants to highlight. She fasted for 3 days. I love this, which is 72 hours. And during that time, we talked about it today, that she prayed the 72 names of God. So she really focused in on who he was. And in that place of fasting, she received her strategy, right? So when we're looking for strategy and understanding for the plans and purposes for our life, what's our assignment now, this is a great way to engage with God. So at the end, right, she receives the strategy. By the end, the king gives her the scepter, right? And then also what happens is she restores the Jewish authority. So she, in this story, is a great example of God's cycle that he wants us to go through, which is to break out, break free, cross over, and possess. And she does that here. It's a model. So the constellation is the goat for this month, which is Capricorn from stars and signs. And we were talking about it today. I already had it here, but I was very interested to see how this constellation associates itself or finds its meaning in the Bible. And it comes from the story where Rebecca tells Jacob to go get, and in the Jewish translation, it's 2 good goats. So it's not just 2 goats. There's 2 different things that are different there with their translation, the original. Is it 2 good goats so that we can make delicacies? And our Bible says, so I think it says, make it something that your father will like add spices and seasonings. And it's the reflection that we bring 2 types of delicacies to the Lord. And let's talk about it. So the good was really identifying that it'll be good for you, and it'll be good for your children if we do this, if you go get 2, and you'll receive material blessings. She knew that he would receive the blessing and everything would go well. The 2 goats are also representative of the 2 goats that are brought into the temple during Yom Kippur to atone for forgiveness and sins. So she knew not to bring 1, but to bring 2 because of what that really was all about, which was the atonement for the forgiveness. So in her own mind, in her own understanding, she knew that even though Esau was the firstborn, she was going to create a path for this to be good. And then there's 2 perspectives of delicacies. So you can create transformation from, it's Esau, right? They call him Asaph in the Hebrew, that's how they say the name, which is really the evil inclination, okay, of our soul. So it's that evil eye that's talked about all throughout this month. And it's really that part of our persona that is represented by the 1 goat, and the other goat is Jacob, which is the righteousness. So there are 2 goats representing both parts of us, what we carry, right? We always want to kind of trump the Esau, right, spirit that's available to us at any time. And then remembering that the sin offering was already made through Jesus. So for us today, the idea of the goat, the scapegoat, is Jesus. So when you get yourself into a situation this month, and things come up, like reminding yourself that Jesus has already done the work, right? And that you've been redeemed, you just hand it over to him. Any questions so far? All right, so here's authority. So this is our last theme, and it's really taking authority both physically and spiritually. And you can all read the slides for yourself here, but there's going to be a very opportune time for us to close out this full cycle, the 10th month, and really taking our thoughts captive. So those whispers that you're powerless or you're a victim, whatever that looks like. Remember, we talked about the different feelings and emotions that are prominent this month. But we want to take authority over our emotions. We want to bind any of the influences, right, that are bringing your perception into a place of anger. And then we really want to continue to deal with the roots of the pain and bringing it under submission of God. And then from a spiritual perspective, it's really understanding your third heaven authority. It's really grasping your position in Christ, and its greater results in prayer. So many times, I thought it was really interesting when I was understanding third heaven authority, how according to people that are the experts in this space, is that, we see results in our life because we're obedient, right? So God may say, I want you to pray for this person, or you're just praying for things and you're doing the things that God's calling you to do. But most of us just do it like linear. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it, but we do it in a linear path, and we still see results because we're being obedient. But when we understand our third heaven authority, we do it from a different perspective. It's no longer linear. It's coming from the top down, and so our effectiveness is so different. So we're carrying his authority, right? We are his signet ring. We talked about that last month. But at this time, we can either, apply, enact the signet ring from this level, which is a linear level on earth, from the physical plane, the first heaven, or we can go to the third heaven and activate it from there, which is going to be a much different effect. And that's really probably a maturity area to really grasp our position. It blows your mind when you really step into Ephesians, right? For the most part, it's all Ephesians. And what authority we really have. And it's a great way to test yourself. Read the scripture and then really ask yourself, do I believe that? Do I believe I can do that? Do I believe he's given me that authority? And start to see where your limiting beliefs are and where you have doubt, because that's something that God will definitely want to heal and enter in with you. But it's so important for us to operate from this level. So I have a little more about that. It's a time for legislative work in the Spirit. So think about that. Esther's, the story, Esther, right? She did a little legislative work, didn't she? Both in the Spirit and in the natural. So for those of you who understand and you know that you're called to doing some of this, it's the courts of heaven. It's sitting in the council of God. It's asking for the cloud of witnesses. And it's really moving towards rendering judgment from God on behalf of you and anything else that's going on, either in your life or in your family, in your bloodline. But this is the opportunity, because we're in the 10th month. We can complete the cycle. We can finish well by taking anything to him and doing legislative work in the Spirit. And then lastly, part of our authority, the thing that we really want to embrace, is angelic activity. And that could have been, all of these would be like its own teaching, right? I'm like, how much can I overload you guys with? But this is a place to really move into from a maturity level. All right, so here's our obstacles and pitfalls. So like 3 more slides, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. So we're not, when we're not practicing restriction, which is also interesting, right? Just from a cultural perspective, this is Christmas, New Year's, all of those holidays. So reminding yourself that restriction and practicing it is going to be your best bet. I don't know what that'll look like. I don't know if it's not eating too many sweets or going to bed at a decent time, or not getting stressed out with having family members in town. But what the opportunity there is a lot of anger and stress coming to you. So keep that in mind. We don't want to connect with negative emotions. So assuming the victim mentality and being stuck, that's definitely an opportunity for a pitfall this month. Not able to channel that light, that chaos into light, and not dealing with anger towards God. So that was something that I stumbled on a lot for this month, is that part of the uprooting and finding out where some of the challenges or the triggers are for us is really being honest and upfront that if there is anger towards God, like don't go into the new year, don't go out of the 10th month, which is again completion, having any anger for the things that you're still struggling with or that you've been through. Really take that to Him and work that. And just another plug for inner healing. This is definitely still a great month to move and make an appointment with the So-So team. Another pitfall is not looking to see God's hand behind everything. The idea that His plans and purposes are to prosper us, giving people the benefit of the doubt, reacting to sticky situations with judgment rather than peace. That's a real opportunity this month. Or this month.
How many times I have to take myself off of judgment seat?
Say that again.
How many times I have to take myself off of the judgment?
Right, as if you're the judge is what you're saying? Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I know. We're so good at it that we think that way.
What I thought was interesting is on the previous slide when you were talking about the judgment, it's God's judgment on your behalf, not your judgment of other people in your situation. And I forget that, so.
Yeah, it's easy to do.
I have to take myself off the judgment seat myself.
Yeah.
Everything, all these slides, every one of them are just packed with so much stuff, so much really applicable stuff in my life.
Good.
And so I'm just like blown away. It's crazy.
It's all God. This is all He has for us. It's so good. When I say all, not like just, just all. We're going to find ourselves possibly mirroring emotions. Think about that. Like you think they're judging you, now you're going to judge them. They're angry, now you're going to be angry. So watch to see if you see any of that sneaking up on you guys. Because the pitfalls are like, now we know how the enemy is going to work, right? Like we've got the inside scoop here. Going to sleep and not seeing the enemy's plans to manipulate your time. So still that parable of the 10 virgins, right? And we started it last month. We went over it pretty in depth, and it still comes over. It's still applicable here. It's very relevant because Hanukkah spans into this month. So really making sure that we're not going to sleep without oil in our lamps, right? Not recognizing and being, caught off guard. Getting caught up in prideful authority. So seeking to get revenge out of anger and bitterness. So again, that goes back to the judgment, like God's judgment versus ours. I think it's the same as prideful authority a lot of times. Yeah, it's kind of like demanding your rights. All right, I was hoping that if you were open to it, maybe we could say these decrees out loud. I just felt like the Lord was saying, I want you to decree and declare a few things. So, can you all read it? Okay, is it something? Yeah, I'm gonna read it, and you can read with me. I decree that we cannot back up. We can only move forward. No enemy can sneak up on me and come from behind and stop me from advancing. We thank you, God, that the evil eye would be stopped, and every watcher spirit that is not sent by you to help would be found out, bound, and tied. We speak the blood of Jesus Christ of Nazareth over our lives, over our families, our church, For every enemy that wants to stop our advancement.
And for every enemy that wants to stop our advancement.
Stop our advancement.
Thank you that we will go forward
Thank you that we will go forward
and that we will shine
and that we will shine
in new ways
In new ways.
by the end of the month.
By the end of the month.
Woohoo! Thank you, Jesus. All right, here's your last slide. So just a summary, allow God's good eye to inspect our condition and raise us up to higher standards, that's a higher perspective, and burn out the dross so we can receive a new assignment. The burning out of the dross is the rededication, it's the cleansing, it's purification. Look to see the best and potential in others, our circumstances, and the best in us, so not too hard on ourselves. Love to speak truth and execute judgment of peace. This is a great potential for greater wholeness and better health. I just felt like as I was looking at everything, the idea of I'm working out that which is in you is really what he's saying so much this month. And release words of life directly into evil. So when you come into the situation, use your mouth to release that, to create it. Remember the pay, but the letter right after this one is the saying, your mouth. And then shout, my blessings are on the way.
My blessings are on the way.
Woo!
All the way. Yay.
All right.
My blessing are on the way.
Yeah. More blessings.
So mention that you're providing documentation throughout the month, right? And then if you guys haven't signed up, please do so you can receive it. Because if you're not on today's list, you won't get the specific content for this month.
And I'm asking everyone to register through the website.
Perfect.
Yeah, for the event, so that we can get everyone's information and quickly just push out the workbook. And it's usually a few days after. Last month was a little later than that. Has anyone used the workbook yet? Did anyone see it come out? Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah? What'd you think so far? Can anyone offer any encouragement for others?
I think that for me personally, a lot of times the busyness of life keeps me from spending time with the Lord on a regular basis. And the workbook was a good reminder to kind of dwell for a bit in some of the things that are going on. I didn't get a chance to continue to apply, but I got a chance to read and reflect. Mm-hmm. And that was a big step in the busyness of what I had that week.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else?
I feel like it would point out some of the points to pray deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's targeted, right? It's for the month, it's for the topics. Hopefully helpful. I felt like when we were envisioning, like creating it, that it could be something that would just sit on your nightstand. You know, like at night, even just like picking an activity right then and there. Because some of it's meditation, some of it's prayer. So there's different activities, and some maybe you want to do, during the day. But it gives you an opportunity, like, oh, what's going on for this week, and maybe then you can plan something for the next day. And from a Hebrew perspective, a Jewish way, the next day starts the night before. So you're already planning your day, getting your strategy, and having success for the next day with starting the night before. All right. Thanks for coming, everybody.